What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court. I am Sean Murphy, and today we got to talk about the fallout of the Pistons NBA trade deadline, Troy Weaver's interview on 97.1 The Ticket earlier this morning, and what that might mean for the Pistons' direction moving forward. But first, if you like this video and you like the content we do here, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel down below. And also, I have a new show called Mornings with the Murph. I do Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays on my second channel, which you can check out right up here. But with that, let's get started. The Detroit Pistons traded for James Wiseman when they traded Saddiq Bey to the Atlanta Hawks and traded Kevin Knox to the Warriors, who they ultimately flipped to the Portland Trail Blazers. And following the deadline, Troy Weaver did an interview on 97.1 The Ticket, and when asked about where the team is at and how he feels about the direction of the franchise, he said, and I quote, "We expect the wins to come. We wanted the record to be better this year at this point. It hasn't, but the pieces are in place for us to take a step forward," which, if you look at the reasons why, in which we've talked about multiple times, why this team hasn't taken a step forward, right? Obviously, it starts with the issues on the defensive end, but again, it ultimately starts and ends with the injury of Cade Cunningham. This team has to be better. They've had, in this article, they cite that this team's had 24 double-digit losses this season and that it's been a rough season. And let's not sugarcoat it. It's been rough on the defensive end. However, as Troy says, there are a lot of pieces in place and a lot of reasons to believe that this team can take a step moving forward. I mean, Jalen Duren is there, James Wiseman, whatever he becomes. I think the rest of this season is definitely going to be a trial period for him. It sounds like, there's belief that potentially maybe a new scene could unlock something for his game. It could be, maybe being in a new environment with new coaches and in a low pressure environment will be good for him. Maybe having that shorter leash is what he needed from the outset of his career all along. Because when you bring in a guy, who's as raw as he was coming out of the draft and put him on the Golden State Warriors and ask him, hey, go be our starting five on a championship caliber team right away. It's just, that's where it gets complicated, and that's where it gets really tricky. And I know everything we've heard about James Wiseman hasn't been the most glamorous. I know I even said yesterday, and I still am not entirely sure on my feelings about James Wiseman as a prospect. However, I am intrigued to at least watch and see what it can do. And at the very least, it can't make us worse on the defensive end having James Wiseman on the court. I mean, his presence, Troy Weaver cites in this article about how the defensive issues were definitely a struggle. And he says, and he even says, because people asked, to like the fans that would be cynical and that would ask, like what the progress has been and why fans should be trusting of this rebuild. He said, I would say that we have enough young, big guys up front to compete now with the addition of Wiseman. We have guard play, although the linchpin of that is out with Cunningham and Ivey and also Hayes. We'll have another top pick this year, and we got some veterans that we held on to help us. And he was even asked, by the way, if there's any plans to trade these guys in the summer, and he was firm and said the plan is for them to be on the court with us. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, unless they get an offer that they absolutely can't refuse, it sounds like Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic are going to be here. And even Troy Weaver cites the fact that they both want to be here as well. So the fact that you have two guys who are as skilled as they are, that are going through as rough as a season as they are, but see, no, there's pieces here. There's true potential. I'll stay and hold on until next year. That's something that's good to have. Granted, it's also because they have the stability and the financial stability, but also a good role in Detroit as well. And he talks about the importance of it. He says you can have vets in the locker room, but when you have vets in the locker room that play and help you, that's a great sign for us going forward. And those guys, to their credit, wanted to stay here and be here. We look forward to moving forward with them. And he also talks about how you have veterans who can take over the game, but also the veterans who know to play within their role and know how to help elevate young guys. And the fact that both Burks and Bojan are two guys that are in particular great for the young players on this team. He talks about how important they are in that sense. And so Troy Weaver even addresses that defense has to be the ethos and has to be the core and the identity of what we do. And it's what Pistons basketball is. And he says in acquiring Wiseman goes into that thought process. If we're going to be the Detroit Pistons and have a chance to be who we are in the restoring, defense has to be at the forefront. We'll get that fixed for sure. So listen, I don't think it's a particularly bad solution to cycle in another big, especially, with the fact that Nerlens Noel is going to be bought out. You have someone that could potentially be a secondary big on the court, but also a backup big in the future if need be. With Wiseman, I don't know if the proclamations of his potential of being a superstar or anything that he's going to be able to achieve in Detroit. I think that's really tough to say, and I think the biggest thing for Wiseman right now is just learning how to succeed and get regular minutes and thrive in the NBA system. And you know what? He's going to get that opportunity these final 20-some games in Detroit, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see. I know as of recording and as of when this comes out for Friday's game, it sounds like he hasn't even gotten through his physical yet, so we'll see how that goes and when he actually joins the team and has his first practice and when he actually gets on the court. I would probably expect it definitely not to be, as of when we're recording, as of tonight, I don't expect James Wiseman to be in the lineup. I would expect he would probably be with the team. I would imagine he'll be in the arena, like in attendance at the game. However, I would imagine, and if I were to guess and to put like a date to expect his debut, I would say either Sunday at Toronto or Wednesday at Boston might be a really good realistic one. Toronto, that allows him a day or two to get the physical in. There's perhaps a practice over the weekend, but by Wednesday for sure, because you at least have another day or two in there. You got to think they're going to have a practice in between then to get Wiseman acclimated in the system, and at the very least, get him to learn a couple basic concepts before he steps out on the court in a Pistons uniform, right? So I'm interested to see how that goes. And as far as for Sadiq, I made some jokes last night on What Were Pistons Table Talk. Well, he's going to Atlanta. He won't do anything. And it's not because of Sadiq. And in all seriousness, I think he actually really can thrive in Atlanta. And if he does embrace the parts of his game that, where he really is at his best, where he's a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, and when he's focused and determined on the defensive end, I think he can do really well there. I definitely, know that there were some frustrations both on the side of the fans, reportedly on the side of the organization, with, and clearly a difference in philosophy and how, they want to move forward. And that's, sometimes when you're going through this rebuild process, when I talked about a couple weeks ago, we need to figure out who's really good players and who are Detroit Pistons going forward. And as much as we love Sadiq, it sounds like the Pistons didn't want to pay the price that he was going to ask for an extension. And so if we weren't going to sign him anyway, and at the very least you're getting somebody who could potentially have value, I don't think it's particularly something that's entirely consequential. And I think the important thing to remember is that it was never about this trade deadline. I mean, sure, this trade deadline was important, and it was one where, we were receiving offers where the Pistons could potentially make changes, and they clearly did that, right? But at the same time, it's always going to be about this summer when the Pistons have over $40 million in cap space, when they have a plethora of wings to choose from, both in the draft as well as in the free agency market, and even if they want to dip into making some trades and actually making some moves, I'm pretty sure the Brooklyn Nets are going to have a plethora of 3-and-D wings that they're going to want to be able to get rid of this summer. I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith is a guy that's going to be available for them, I'm sure. Cam Johnson would be an interesting guy to call about. Mikal Bridges is going to be one of the most sought-after prospects in the NBA over the next couple of years. So there's a lot of options for the Detroit Pistons, but also it sets the clear sights of what this team needs to accomplish. First of all, they have to figure out this logjam that they've now created at the big position. I mean, it definitely does give them, like he said, that ability to, have that stronger and more firm front line on the defensive end. But at the same time, you have to consider the fact, and you have to talk about the fact that we need wings. Like, we have guards, we have bigs, but you need that piece in the middle. I mean, and that, especially ever since Jeremy Grant left, I think that revealed, where Sadiq was going to go as far as a 3-and-D player. I think obviously Isaiah Livers having more playing time now is going to help quite a bit. I know James hinted at the fact that, a Jeremy Grant return in free agency is something that could possibly happen. I personally would not be opposed to that in any way, shape, or form. But again, the Pistons are going to have some really important decisions to make. And now, I think especially to end the season, I'm interested to see if there's going to be some competition between Wiseman and Marvin Bagley. And it's interesting, two guys that were in very similar situations when they both came to Detroit, both kind of guys who dealt with health issues and also just couldn't really find a consistent role, and part of the rotation kind of weren't what the team was hoping that they would be. But now, could they find a new home, and can they do that in Detroit? I know we signed Marvin to that extension, but that doesn't mean that he can't be traded at some point in the future. And again, it's important to note that this isn't entirely uncommon to have a lot of bigs or have a lot of players of a similar archetype on your roster. I would cite to the Philadelphia 76ers during the process how they didn't just bring in Joel Embiid. In fact, they brought in Jahlil Okafor, they brought in Nerlens Noel, and they brought in Joel Embiid, and they cycled out and trialed all of those big men. And then that wasn't even the only big men they had on their roster at that point either. They even had Christian Wood was within their system at that point too. So it's not like they were like stopping at one big prospect. No, they filtered out, went and got as many players as they could. And ultimately the ones that stick and are good NBA players, they stick with, and the others they trade and try and build around the pieces they have in house. Even the Cleveland Cavaliers, they traded both Colin Sexton and Darius Garland in consistent years. Then they had them play together, trial out which guard they wanted to have, ultimately decided Darius Garland was that guy, traded Colin Sexton a year and a half later, and boom, they have Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, and an awesome squad. That's what you do. You filter out talent. You get as many young players in your system as possible. You figure out who fits and who doesn't. And at the end of the day, you see who you want to build around. That's what you do in a rebuild. And so I'm not mad at Troy Weaver, bringing in a guy that he believes in. I mean, sure, at a certain point, we do just have to pick a direction. And at a certain point, we need to stop having projects, and we need to start having more proven commodities. But I think that's what this summer is going to be about. So I would be interested to hear what your thoughts are on what Troy Weaver did over the trade deadline. I would love to know, now that you had some time to process your thoughts on the trade, if your thoughts have changed at all. But also, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And if you want to talk about it more with people in our community, be sure to join the From Half Court Discord, where we're talking about basketball in there all the time. You can join in the link in the description below. But with that, folks, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe.